For all my inconsistencies on upload schedule and type of content I make, no one can say that there is not variety on the channel because we kind of have everything at this point. We have drama videos. We have like two of them, not that many. They're not even that good, but point being, we have One Piece videos. We have anime videos. I separate them just because, personal bias. We have movie reviews, book reviews, video game reviews, I think. I have like one or two of them. I know I have a really shitty fantasy video I made. I have an unboxing somewhere. We really have kind of everything on here. But this is probably going to be our last content shift because I am committed. I'm very committed to making these. I put the quotations before I said anything. I'm really committed to making these video essay type videos. So that's what's probably going to be going on for now on. Until I either get lazy, stop doing them, or decide to do something else. But for now, in my current mindset, that is exactly what we're going to be doing. I'm going to really try not to bore you with any of the really dumb details about what's going on with the channel or anything like that. So I'll keep that to the very end for anyone who actually cares or wants to hear about it. I'm sure you've read the title already, and I didn't really pick the most out there wild topic I could have picked for a video essay just to start off with, but it's one that I did want to pick just because plague doctors have a really strange place in history, mostly because they kind of become ingrained in our culture as these cool gothic characters or these like silly little guys, like they have like the plushies and shit. I used to own one of the plushies. And I'm not saying it as if it's supposed to be an issue. I just find it very interesting. I'm sure most of you have opened up a history book or taken a history class at some point and you're pretty, at least vaguely aware of what the Black Death was. Pretty horrible plague, ravaged its way through Europe, fish and chip style. But what I actually wasn't really aware of until I started doing research for this video was that the plague doctor thing didn't really show up until the 14th century. Like, yeah, there's plague doctors that existed beforehand, but I'm mostly referring to what we think of as a plague doctor. They're, you know what I mean? They're the ones with these like crow-like beaks, the leather uniforms covered in sticky wax or whatever, and the pokey canes. It's pretty common knowledge now that the idea behind those beaks was to fill them with herbs and thoracic, or I'm pronouncing that horribly wrong, but that kind of stuff, and perfumes to keep miasma away. And at the time it seemed like a pretty great idea because a lot of them just assumed that miasma was how the plague was being spread and how people were, So even though it sounds like a really dumb idea looking back, you can't really blame them because at the time they just didn't know any better. That's because like germ theory wasn't really a thing back then. People weren't really aware of germs. I mean, a lot of those people didn't fucking shower. So, I'm sure they weren't really helping the spread of the plague by doing that. But the point I'm trying to get across is that a lot of things that they did really just came down to their best guess. And guessing was pretty much just a big part of their job. Because plague doctors weren't really the same as general practitioners. Yeah, they have doctor in the title, but for the most part, those two groups didn't even really have the same people in them. A lot of the doctors who actually made enough money to make a living off being a doctor didn't want anything to do with the plague. They didn't want to be anywhere near it. They didn't want to touch those patients. They wanted quite literally nothing to do with it. Obviously, there's some exceptions, but for the most part, plague doctors were either unsuccessful practitioners, unfortunately, rookie doctors, or just random ass people off the street who were willing to do the work. Which again, looking back is horrifying because if I was being treated knowing that the person treating me either was not a good doctor, was a new doctor, or was just a random dude, I would I'll keep that to myself. But like I said, a lot of their job involved guesswork than actual doctor work because a lot of them really weren't that good at being doctors. From the research I did, a lot of the methods that they used to heal these people were using leeches, bloodletting, which I think is the same thing, but different words, and other things like perfume and herbs and shit like that, but also some really strange ones like bathing in urine. I don't know. If it worked, I guess. However, I think the most interesting thing about that is that they had a bunch of other jobs that were vaguely related to being a doctor, but were also kind of in a really wide range of things that you just wouldn't expect a doctor to be doing. I'm sure for you it's only been like 2 or 3 minutes, but for me it's been like 20 just because I stutter a lot. But back to what I was saying, a lot of them were expected to assist in autopsies of the sick and dissect them and just really just dig into them for any kind of research and knowledge they can get out of those bodies. And they were also supposed to quarantine people who appeared sick or who were too sick to go out. So, that's not cool. One of the weirder things they had to do was be there for someone who was dying and like take their will and testament and things of the sort, which again is pretty strange to expect a doctor to do, but for the time I guess that works. And on paper that is a really good, nice thing of them to do, except there's a lot of reports from what I read that some plague doctors just took the will, the money, and dipped. There's no actual way to confirm that, so it's sort of just up to what you believe. I'm going to believe it's a healthy middle of some who did it and some who didn't, just because I don't want to assume they're evil people, but I'm sure not all of them were nice people. But I think one of the best things that they could have contributed to the plague in general was that they documented nearly everything. And that's pretty much what led to them even figuring out how to stop the plague, or at least prevent it, or make it a little easier to survive. And you can't quote me on that because this part I couldn't actually confirm with research, but my headcanon is that also did help a lot with germ theory, and that's how they kind of made that big leap to germ theory. God, I'm kicking ass right now. All that combined to make up this general image of what a plague doctor was that a lot of people, and rightfully so, were genuinely terrified of. Like, petrified. Like, the minute they saw one, horrified. And yeah, not all of them were bad people, but even so, like, you never wanted to see a plague doctor show up in your town or village or anywhere. You never wanted to see one near you, because it pretty much almost always meant you're gonna fucking die. Because they're making you bathe in piss and putting leeches on you. Realistically, you're not gonna survive if they show up, because that means the plague is already there. And it really does suck, but that's kind of just how they were viewed. So when you take all of that in, all that information in, some would wonder, why on earth would you take that job? Of all jobs you could ever take, why? Yeah, if you were a failed doctor or a rookie, maybe I could see why you'd do it. But their lives pretty much sucked from the moment they put on that costume to when they died. They were pretty much forced to live in isolation, or else they'd risk infecting other people. And the reason any of them even took on that job was because of the relatively good pay for the time. And I couldn't confirm this with too much research, but I did see some reports that a lot of them were offered real estate when the plague was over. So I guess, yeah, if you're willing to risk your life for property, go off, I guess. It wouldn't be enough for me, but I can kind of see that at the time it was probably a lot more worth it for people who just wanted to have something to say it was worth it. And a lot of what I pretty much just said is general knowledge. Some stuff is a little more niche, I guess, but for the most part, a lot of that is just stuff you could find on your first Google search. But it's at this point right here in the video, I'm going to slice it in half, is where the history starts to get a little strange. Not this next part, but I'll lead into it. It's like it's little rabbit holes. You got to follow me through it. So obviously there's a lot of evidence of them being criticized for their methods and how everyone was afraid of them and their outfits and all this, ton of stuff like that. I think one of the most well-known instances of them being criticized was this drawing by, watch me butcher this, Paulus First. I'll just throw it up on screen. And he argued that plague doctors pretty much just do nothing but terrify people, which we've already went over that. Yeah, I'd be horrified if one showed up on my doorstep. But that is the part that's to be expected. Here's where it starts to actually get strange, because the character of the plague doctor started to become a very prominent figure in the Carnival scene. So much so that they were pretty much a mainstay in theater at that time. And it's around the early 16th to 17th century when this sort of prevalence in theater and the Carnival scene started to become very noticeable. And something I didn't mention up until now on purpose is that, and please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, obviously, but from my research, aside from the drawings and newspaper images of the outfits like these, we don't really have any evidence that more than maybe a handful of plague doctors, if any at all, actually wore the beaked outfits pre-17th century. And it's because of this lack of evidence that any of them even wore the outfit pre-17th century that sparked this debate among historians whether the plague doctor came first or the plague doctor theater character came first, if that makes sense. You see, when I started doing research for this video, I was hoping to find some like dark or disturbing facts about plague doctors, and instead I came away from it kind of finding some humor in it, because obviously the whole Black Plague thing was horrible. But for there to be a debate whether the plague doctor was a doctor first or a carnival character first just seems kind of comical, especially when you take into account their current status among like pop culture and shit like that. I don't know, that wasn't really the takeaway I was expecting to come away from. And I don't think I even have any feelings on it aside from it kind of just being a little funny. Because it's just the outcome I would have never expected to come out of research. Really weird tongue twister, sorry. Man is thirsty. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about that whole thing. Obviously, I could probably go into it a lot more. I could probably, if I'm being honest, I could probably kick out like a 30-40 minute video on that. But I just wanted to keep the first sort of video essay thing I do relatively short, just so I could start getting into the swing of things, start getting a little more used to it. But that's pretty much everything I have to say on the topic. Everything else after this is just going to be general channel updates. So if you don't care about any of that, later. Cool. So if you're still here, it means you want to hear me ramble about relatively meaningless things. But as I mentioned in the beginning, this is pretty much going to be what the content is from now until probably forever, because stupid camera, from now until whenever, just because I don't think I want to do another content change, and this is pretty much something I'm pretty okay with. I like the research aspect of it. I like writing notes down and reading them off the screen, even though it feels weird and I wasn't able to see how my camera was doing just because it's the first time with an actual camera. So I'll get better with that. I might keep these snazzy black bars though. They kind of had a vibe to it, you know, like a vintage vibe that I feel really goes with the low aspect ratio or low resolution, whatever. That's probably going to be a mainstay even when I do get a better camera. Those black bars are going to be my trademark. If I'm being honest, I'm really just using a regular mic that I took the stand off because it felt a little bougie to kind of hold a mic like that. I will get better with actually speaking to this little thing though, because I could just now I'm looking at the red bar just blast on OBS, and I'm really scared most of this audio is useless because of how loud it is. But we'll see. In terms of videos that are coming, I do have 2 ideas that I may or may not make. I will make one of them. I'm not going to say which one because I have a really bad habit of promising videos that never happen. But I will make one of them. And I'm hoping that'll come out the week after this comes out, because I'm going to record this. You don't care about all that. But yeah, that's about it.